Hello, everyone. Thank you for your patience as we were getting ready for today. There's kind of a lot going on in all our worlds, so appreciate you all. Um, well, today I wanted to talk about this idea, what we're hearing a lot on the streets, that DEI is dead. Been hearing a lot that diversity, equity, inclusion industry has been taking a hit. Funding is getting cut. Interest in the content and the work itself is dropping. Consultants are feeling this dramatic shift from commitments that statements that were made in 2020, reduced to a fraction of that energy that we see in 2023. And at the same time, I'm hearing from folks like some of my guests today that equity work, social justice work is also emerging more prominently in workplaces. So today, we're going to talk with two social justice and DEI practitioners who've been adapting to this new social political landscape, both at home and at work, maybe over the last 5 years, 2 years, 10 years, right? So, really excited to have this conversation with you all. I'm welcoming here today Marquita James and Carmella Montenegro. Hello, both of you.
Hi.
Hey, what's
Hi.
up?
So, really, to start first, myself, for an intro for folks who do not know me, my name is Carissa Begonia. I am a business coach for BIPOC entrepreneurs, a LinkedIn expert and top voice. I'm a second generation Filipino American daughter of immigrants, and the first and only in my family to start my own business. I believe that entrepreneurship is the path to equity and that life design is liberation. And at Conscious Exchange, we're creating an ecosystem, a movement of BIPOC entrepreneurs with this mission to achieve time, financial, location, and occupational freedom, not just for themselves, but also for their families and their communities. I'm also, just as a note for this particular topic, a former diversity, equity, inclusion consultant and work with a lot of equity based folks. And so that's why hearing all of this in the streets is important for me, I think, for us to talk through. So thank you all so much for joining Wisdom and Wellness. What this series is my business besties and I share some practical and mindset tips around questions and questions that were commonly asked when it comes to running a business. So if you have a question or if you just want to say hi, share some love, let us know in the comments. And then speaking of my business besties, again, here are my two friends, clients, friends that I love just being around, Marquita and Carmella. Marquita and Carmella, would love for you just to share a little bit more about yourselves, your backgrounds with the audience here.
Yeah, I can go first. Again, my name is Carmela Montenegro. I'm a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant for the outdoor industry, primarily focusing on the for-profit side. I used to be an outdoor educator, music educator, special education person. A lot of that experience has taken me to outdoor education. I've noticed a lack of equity and representation, especially as I've gotten jobs in outdoor education, retail, and nonprofit work. And I remember looking through my old company yearbook, 10 years, and I thought, I'm probably only the fifth person of color. And in that moment, I discovered I don't want anybody else to feel that way. So I've been doing that equity work since 2017, and I've taken it more seriously in the past year. So I'm excited to chat with you all today to talk about my experiences and how we can move to more equity. And
Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks.
Hi, Carmela, Carissa. It's such a pleasure to be here with you all
yeah,
and
pleasure.
all the folks who might be joining from wherever on the planet they are. My name is Marquita James. She, her, or my name are all fine to call me. I am principal and founder of Langyap Consulting, where we do conflict transformation and leadership coaching work in support primarily of social justice and social change organizations. And I am so excited about this call today. The first thing when Krista said, gave us the invitation, the title, I was like, who says DEI is dead in the first place? Where we are accepting a presumption that actually isn't the loudest voice in my ear. So excited to engage in that conversation with you all, and also to think about fresh ways that folks are thinking about equity and inclusion. I dare say it's like the thing isn't dead. In many spaces, it is becoming more infused in the way that people are moving, which is what we want it to do in some spaces. And we can talk about what those spaces look like, and also talk about the spaces where that might have prompted the title of today's gathering. So glad to be with y'all. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, let's talk about it. Thank you, Marquita, for bringing that up. That what do you mean it's dead? What are we? And are we feeding into that narrative? So we'll get into that in a bit. But first, I just want to hear a little bit more too about what brought you to this work. How did you start? And yeah, how did you start? What brings you to this day? Which is the why?
Yeah, I can go on that. Earlier, I spoke about how I was probably only the fifth person of color in my outdoor program in its 10-year history. And it's a recurring theme that I see all the time in the outdoor industry. I do this for REI, I do this for ski industries, and I find people of color and in general BIPOC to be in the single digits when you're looking at percentages. And it's really frustrating talking to these individuals and hearing their stories about, I love the culture, but it's not for me. I really love how I get to play outside, and this is normal within the team. But when we hang out at the bars, there's nothing for me to talk about. And with my clientele and being in this environment, I see that all the time. And it's really heartbreaking to think that they want to be in these spaces. But again, it's not inclusive enough for them to feel safe to get a drink. But in the workspace, it's another conversation. Another part of the why is the personal story and seeing the impact. When I did this for my undergrad, when I was an outdoor educator, my director at the time, he wanted me to talk to international students, scholarship students, first generation students, students that were in the city that had never left the area. And I found out that we were able to fill in waitlist some of our courses through these external programmings, because some of our programmings would be bilingual, would have secondary leaders that are leaders that are international. So there was a lot of opportunity there, and it's really cool to showcase how, especially in the outdoor industry, how participating in the outdoors compared to participants that were from Korea or India, for example, seeing their experiences was very heartwarming, and it just reminds me of why I do this.
Thanks, Marquita. I mean, Carmella, how about you, Marquita?
So I came to this work, and I want to clarify what I mean by this these days, because it changes, it is evolving, which I expect we will spend some time talking about today. But I came to conflict transformation, generative conflict, coaching for executive leadership, coaching and consulting for social justice organizations as a mediator. You know? What was important to me was finding ways to support people in having difficult conversations in lots of different places. So not necessarily at social justice organizations, not necessarily at organizations at all. It was really, for me, about finding ways to make it easier for people to talk to each other in ways that were impactful, and in ways that might keep us away from some of the headlines that we are seeing today, for instance. And that work began to grow, and a realization I began to see, as I thought about my own impact more and more, while I value the importance of individual mediation, I'm also deeply committed to supporting groups and figuring out how to group better in service to social justice and social change, which lends itself to really being willing to roll up sleeves together and have courageous conversations, not just about the other, whomever we have decided to other, as we are working to make the world a better place, but importantly, how we have those courageous conversations internally so that our external values are reflected internally. And so that is how my work has begun to shift. And I would say, as a very, 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 very young mediator, I thought I was doing equity work just by being in the room, which is true and not true. The more practiced I got, the more seasoned I got, and the more my own social and political awareness grew, it became clear to me that representation alone is not sufficient. Presence alone is not sufficient, and um, part of my seasoning now means that equity is embedded in all that I do. So you can't have courageous conversations without also having courageous conversations about equity, about power, um, about race, about gender, about insert volatile topic that is appearing in the headlines today, but just as importantly in our lives today.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing kind of the origins of the work and even how that's just been beginning to evolve to today. One of the curiosities I have, because for both of you, is how you decided on the niche. So Carmella in the outdoor industry, right? Marquita moving more towards the hardest part of, I think, the equity work is the conflict piece, right? And having courageous conversations. So and so, when a lot of times people ask me about DEI, either getting into the work just as new consultants, or even starting to find their lane, find what differentiates them from other practitioners. It really is, I think, finding that niche in this big umbrella of what DEI even means, right? Like, what is equity work, right? There's like racial equity work, right? Gender equity, et cetera. And so, how did you come across or come into like specificity, whether that's within industry, topically, identity, um, and how have you seen maybe that shift too? Were you more general at some point, and then like, okay, like no, let's focus. Like, why did you maybe make some of those decisions that you've made?
Yeah, I have been in the outdoor industry since 2017. I don't really know any other world. I did that in my undergrad. I dabbled with the tech industry. That one's a hot mess in its own, but that it's a hot mess in its own, but it's not I haven't dabbled enough for me to confidently say like that's where I want to be. And I started talking about it in outdoor education. I started talking about it in early childhood education, and that's where the root is. I pivoted a little bit more from outdoor education from outdoor education because most of their resources and support come from the university setting. So if there were to be like an inclusive office, for example, in their college, they would go to them as a resource. Independent guides, they would usually go to local government council for support, whereas bigger companies, they usually approach me where there's not as much red tape and I have more capacity to challenge them. So that's part of why I've decided to pivot more into small and medium-sized businesses, slowly breaking into larger businesses in the for-profit size because they're more open-minded to that level of challenge, whereas smaller companies are limited to the resources they have either in the university or government level. I also chose at the moment working on the ski industry because of the location where I live. I live up in Summit County, Colorado, where within a half hour there's 5 major ski resorts, and a lot of them are having the same issues. And a lot of it is based with lack of hiring and lack of housing, and finding that by tapping into different communities, there's a lot more opportunity for hiring and retention. So that's where my passion currently is, and it bleeds into the rest of the outdoor industry as well.
Yeah, some interesting things you and I have talked about, Carmela, about the outdoor industry is, they talk about sustainability, and so there's kind of you think there's just more of this interest in in social causes, right, or issues
Mhm.
like environmental issues, right, which is also a social issue. So, uh, do you see that same appetite kind of going into what Marquita was talking about of what do you mean DI is dead? Like, are you seeing this, like the outdoor industry have an appetite for more naturally for these conversations and for for equity work?
Yeah, it's definitely a newer conversation to be having, especially at the higher level. Um, so one thing I'm learning, I'm also a graduate student at Western Colorado University for the Outdoor Industry MBA program, and things that we're working on outside of financial accounting, we're going to be talking about sustainable accounting. So we're going to talk about accounting for carbon emissions and carbon footprint, which I think is really cool. I've never heard of this concept until I started grad school. But in the economics class and in our ethical leadership class, we're going to be talking about the triple bottom line, or ESGs as well. So environmental, social, and governance. And we're finding a lot of connections when it comes to leadership and social governance and how that improves cost of goods sold and increases profits. Because people are doing well, you have to hire less and you have to work less on retention, and that helps feed into productivity and revenues, which I find really fascinating. That this is a conversation that is this is taken more seriously when you're looking at larger outdoor companies that are hitting, from what I'm finding, like the 5 to 10 million mark, that they've made enough money to be sustainable, and now they want to figure out how to be more impactful with their revenue, which I find really interesting. And a lot of outdoor companies are interested in B Corp certification, and B Corp certification holds them accountable through external auditing. And there's going to be a big push for more diversity, equity, inclusion points. For those who are not familiar, B Corp, they score you out of 200 points. You have to have at least 80 points, and in the next coming years, they want you to diversify those points. And there's going to be a lot of push toward racial, gender, and mental diversity when we're looking at accounting and how that impacts B Corp certification and overall impact.
Yeah, thanks for that. I didn't even think about probably there's a greater percentage of B Corps within the outdoor industry potentially. Maybe, I don't know if that's statistically correct, but not even thinking about that connection between what they'll need if you're going to become B Corp certified. So,
yeah, big
thanks
connection.
Yeah. Marquita, how about you moving into conflict, like, difficult, challenging conversations? Did that find you? Did you find that? Like, what brings you into like the heat of what equity work is unfortunately we have to deal with. We have to have these conversations, right?
I think it's the heat of life. So this is again me like pushing back against our attempt to silo equity work. It just is. If you're living, breathing human, equity is a part of your equity or not is a part of your reality. So you don't have to subscribe to wokeism or unsubscribe. You are alive, you breathe, which means it is just here. We are all swimming in this water, regardless of whether we bring awareness to it or not. So I hope that's helpful. Just in terms of the way that I think about, again, what this is in the water that we're swimming in. So given that, Carissa, if we think about the things that are, if I orient as I do toward impact, we cannot escape conflict. And the more I learn about intergenerational trauma and wisdom, the more I'm like, oh yeah, we have been wrestling with conflict for centuries before we arrived. And over time, my awareness has grown to just see how much promise there is in our ability to harness the power of conflict and learn how to move through it generatively, instead of using a lot of the protective measures that we have used as individuals, as families, as organizations, as countries, as societies, as a planet, to make our way through what Prince would call this thing called life. So that is what drew me to it. When I see people, what I want to know is, what conflicts have you encountered? What have you made your way through? What has gotten you stuck? It's just part of how I dissect the world today. And it's how I just really love helping people dissect the world and how they move through it.
And when so you started like your equity work within like concentrating in this, or
I started as a conflict practitioner, as a mediator.
Yeah. So that's so
mediator and a facilitator.
Really went into that.
Yeah. Straight away. So that's what, Carmella, what's the OGs? What's going?
I could not do that full time like you do. I do it a little bit through my DEI work, and I love it. I think it's super important. It allows me to build that relationship and show them how to manage conflict, but I cannot do it all the time like you do. It's not, it's fun, it's good for me, but I could not do it like you can.
What I would say, Carmela, or I wonder what you think about this. As a human, you're doing it all the time. You're either doing it so well that you're not paying attention to it, or you hit some road, you know, maybe, you know what, Carmela, with you, you're probably golden, and it's everybody around you who doesn't know how to handle conflict, right? But that's we are doing it, which is part of my point. And so it is my pleasure and my delight, and sometimes my pain, to be honest with you, to guide individuals and organizations in figuring out how to navigate it better so that they can be more impactful in their work.
I mean, it kind of is the core of this work, right? I think it is that there are opposing or even internal conflicts,
Yeah.
what's going on, or even the acknowledgement of our experiences that maybe again was something more, some tension or so. So I agree with you, Marquita. Maybe haven't seen it as, and maybe the relationship too is conflict is always going to be tenuous. It's always going to be like strong battles, and that's not necessarily the case. But maybe a lot of us maybe associate when you hear conflict, you hear yelling and screaming,
Yeah.
and
No,
disagreement, like strong disagreement.
some of the most heated conflicts we can find ourselves involved in, and I keep saying it's individuals, it's organizations, it's societies, are actually quite quiet. So you can have a heated, very silent uh, conflict. And one thing I like to remind people is that not having a conversation is still a conversation. So I really do see conflict as conflict, and our ability to move through it skillfully as just being at the heart of what it means to be human and to be better humans.
Yeah. As you're sharing that, I think back to my emotional intelligence work from like as part of my foundational platform for DEI, or equity work. And it's sounding similar in that the first part of EQ is awareness, right? Being able to name that this is happening, and so and what you're feeling, so that you can start to make choices about what to do next, right, or what not to do. And so the way I see that, that's a foundational core to this work, but just life. I'm feeling like that is similar to how you think about conflict. It's like it is that it is core, is the beginning. Like this is it's always happening in micro and macro ways. We don't name it that way because maybe again the association is conflict is always just heated arguments, So thank you for that repositioning or reframing. So I'd love to address now what you said earlier, Marquita, and brought up the idea that hey, is DI dead? Like, is that real? Is that
Says who? Says who?
says who, as you say, right? So I'd love to hear from both of you. So says who? My experience, are other consultants coming and telling me that um, their income or their revenue this year versus prior years has dropped significantly, and how to maybe have conversations, or where are people finding clients. My proof is articles, also like maybe from some of these practitioners even saying that that is what they are experiencing when they're seeing if organizations want to re-up or restart their contracts, add to their contracts, or even being told we need to reduce this, right? Or when they're going in and people want to do the work and their budgets are severely reduced. So that's my data. Those are my data points. And I also have equal data points of consultants and friends, clients who are like, yeah, like it's coming, it keeps coming, So that's why I wanted to have the conversation, because helping folks to see what's the reality of this, be like the truth in this decline, and where I know it's thriving for some folks. How do you re-see in like different opportunities in it, right? Like Carmella, even thinking about the ski industry, like not even outdoor industry, but like just this micro world of like just even the ski industry, there's interest. And so, can you share, both of you, share more about what is your thought when I say, in this title, right? Like DEI is not dead, or is DEI dead? What's the truth in that for you? The reality in that for you? And how potentially have you? What are you seeing? If, since I know both of you are thriving in the space.
Yeah, I had a call yesterday with a prospective client, and they recalled an email that I had sent them previously, and I said, "Working with me is hard. You might not want to hire me." That's essentially what the email said. And I had met one of them, or one of the people on that team in real life, and they asked me to clarify. And then I responded to this person and I emailed everybody else back and I said, the way that I perceive other DEI consultants to work is not as effective as it used to be. When you look at research through Aparna Ray and Lily Zheng, they have found that one-off DEI training, so you do like a 1 day intensive, for example, most of that work and education dissipates after 3 to 5 days. And Lily Zheng has, in their book DEI Deconstructed, has mentioned that if you don't construct that training appropriately, some people after that 3 to 5 business days, or days in general, they'll pat themselves on their back, say, "Okay, I acknowledged that I made myself uncomfortable. I'm good." It's simply a check the box kind of solution. And I cited these sources to this prospective client. And I added a little bit more saying, the way I work is made to challenge you. The way that I work is going to be more discussion and accountability based instead of me talking at you for the whole duration of our time together. And there's going to be a lot of pre work, there's going to be some one on one work. And that work I found with several of my other one off clients to be most impactful because of that level of relationship that I have with that clientele. And I mentioned that to them, and we had that sales call yesterday about my stance on how to be more impactful through that work. Otherwise, if I'm just receiving a paycheck, I don't believe that a transactional relationship is truly conducive to the longer term work of DEI work. So, again, I go more intensely with the few clients that I do have because I am truly dedicated to long term impact. And they need to feel uncomfortable. It's also hard because I'm not selling a feel good service like most people want when you're doing marketing and you're looking at strategy. But that's why I upload it with, "You might not want to hire me." And that in itself is enough of a marketing and branding stance that it works well in my favor because of how I work. Um, So I think moving forward, DEI in its old ways is dead. We need to look at the data of what is not impactful when we're looking at long-term work, especially as budgets are being cut and they're looking at reasons why not to hire another DEI consultant because they spent thousands of dollars for something that's not going to truly make an impact. When I worked as a freelance social media manager, it got harder when I asked, "Hey, you spent money on a freelance social media manager. Can you tell me about what's going on? You spent money on it before, you're likely to hire somebody else again." And they go, "Well, it didn't work previously, so I'm not going to do it ever again." I don't want that to happen in the DEI world. So I want to do it right the first time they would hire somebody. That way, should somebody else come by, they're going to have a good experience.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing the hard stand on what your beliefs are, and not watering it down, um, which potentially there was some of that happening in 2020,
Mm-hmm.
because of the, just like the massive interest all of a sudden getting called. I don't know what your both of yours experiences was, but in that time, left and right, like it was just coming. The calls, the interest, the emails, like inquiries are coming in, and probably without a solid understanding of why, because we're reactionary, right? Um, so I appreciate you having this firm, like, this is what I'm going to do, is what I believe in. If you're not down for that, you probably want to go work with someone else. Just not budging on your, what you're rooted in, what your beliefs are, in for this work to be successful.
Yeah, thank you. It's a branding tip. I will tell you that.
How about you, Marquita?
I love that.
The branding tip. The branding tip.
I love that. I love
Don't
that.
hire me.
Oh, you might not want to, which is
Yeah.
actually it's a really wise way to start for this particular kind of work.
Mhm.
What I will say, what's coming up for me is that, like you, Carmella, I'm fortunate enough to be very particular about the inquiries that I respond to. So in that respect, I'm not feeling. I'm also my circle is primarily social justice and social change. So in that sphere, if you to the extent that you think diversity, equity, and inclusion, and folks also tack on justice and belonging, which is something we can or cannot get into on this call today. Um, it cannot be. It is at the very heart of the work that most folks in social justice and social change spaces are doing. How they express it might shift from mission, vision, values, one mission, vision, value statement to another, but it's at the core of what folks are doing. And so to folks who are experiencing or feeling like DEI is dead in their client pool or at their own institution, if they are thinking about the place they work or the circles they're moving in, I'm curious about how alive it ever was, really, is my question there when we think about performative intervention as opposed to, again, infusion feels like the word of the day today, how this kind of work is infused into what you're doing and your purpose. I'm a very purpose-centric person, purpose-centric, purpose-driven person. And my clients are, or they're not my clients. To your point, Carmella, which is why I am not. I hear the strand. I hear what you were saying, and it's just my experience that those are the wrong clients, and they're indicating those organizations are indicating that it's not a priority for them, which honestly is helpful to know, so we can be, it's what's the phrase with friends like that, who needs enemies? So it's just helpful. It is incredibly helpful to know where people are. So if you're getting cues that DEI is dead at your organization in the circles you're running in, I really do think it's time. It's an invitation to reassess where you are and where you are.
Yeah. So I know that even both of the two of you. So first of all, Marquita, I love what was their stance on this, and what was their commitment to this to begin with, and that probably is very accurate, frankly, from 2020 when everyone, again, it was reactionary, right? And now we all have to care and have a statement because we look bad if not, So potentially that's going to happen again now, right? With what the conflict that's going on, the unfortunate things, the terrible things that are going on in Gaza. So with that, seeing the commitment that people have, or the lack of commitment that organizations had or industries have, right? And there are still organizations that are committed, that actually are showing up. And so it's kind of what we were talking about in the pre-live or just off, like backstage, was like who your real friends are, right? Like who the true allies are, and I think that's showing up now. And so now the question for me becomes, okay, frequency, and with all these other consultants too, how to find work, because for both of you, it's like it's inbound. It's just, here it is, like you're getting the calls, right? And other folks' experiences is not that, right? Maybe a few of their potential, like past clients, but significantly, again, their roster has dropped and are left like wondering, okay, where am I going to find new clients and such? I don't know if you have any thoughts around other practitioners who are struggling. That is real, because their clients might have been some of their more performative ones.
I again see it as but I'm not the conflict person, right? So I'm looking for the opportunity. I see it as an opportunity
Nice.
to refine both your client pool and your craft. This is hard work, y'all. This is hard work. And I dare say that anybody listening to this call who's attracted here, you are likely doing hard work in whatever arena you are, whether DEI is the name attached to it or not. And so people really, it can be helpful for folks to think about relationship advice and breakups. Like sometimes you need a new circle. You need a new circle and you need a new approach. And it might be difficult, it might be painful, really interested and open to talking with folks who are listening to this or might see it later about their approach and how it's being met. Because there is some, Carmella, I'm really appreciating you say, yeah, some people were, not only were some organizations doing, extending invitations for performative work, there have been consultants who have done performative work, sometimes with very good intentions. So it's really, I think, an invitation for all of us to get clear about the water we want to swim in and who we're swimming with, but then also get really refined and hone our craft and have some hard conversations as a consulting industry, and as folks who are deeply committed to equity, inclusion, diversity, belonging, all of these wonderful things about what we're actually doing. What is it that we're engaged in? And are we doing it in the right places? Are we moving the right levers? Are we offering the right scaffolding for any individual client? But then also thinking more broadly than any particular client or any particular contract that's coming through. Like, what is this enterprise that we are collectively engaged in? And can we be better at it?
Yeah. I love the challenges. Every time I talk to you, Marquita, it's like the curiosity, challenges. It's like another ways of thinking. And that's what I think we need to be doing generally, and particularly in equity spaces. Marquita, you also work primarily with, you said social justice, social change organizations, also nonprofits, right? And that's another thing I hear from a lot of folks is nonprofits don't have money. Nonprofits aren't or resources. And again, I have evidence of folks that are thriving even more than in 2020 with that. So just curious if you have another kind of thought or statement around that to help people who are also a lot of people that maybe follow me work with nonprofit organizations. So the counter argument of like DI being dead and nonprofits not having funding or not having money.
Some of them don't. So I don't want to dismiss that reality for some organizations. Some of them don't. Some of them do have funding, and this kind of work is like well done equity and inclusion work isn't a priority for them. And I myself am learning to distinguish earlier which organization is which, like being able to sort the wheat from the chaff. And so again, that is information, it's data. So who are your people? If not them, then who? And I am so pleased to be able to report that there are organizations who are doing this work, seeking this work, curious about it, open to embedding it in what they do in more robust ways. So there's a lot of find your people is the phrase that feels appropriate in this moment. You got to find your folks. And it is important to me not to discount people who are getting feedback. They're hearing the no's. That's real too.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear from both of you because there is discernment with who you work with. And it, as like you said, Marquita, I'm starting to figure out earlier, like who is actually committed. Do you have some suggestions or tips for consultants, whether they're also trying to find those organizations from scratch, or if they're inbound, they're coming in, right? To be able to discern sooner, or just discern period, so that they're not like after the fact realizing, oh, this was maybe not the best like relationship. So any thoughts on how you've been figuring that out for yourselves and who you choose to work with?
Yeah, for me, I prefer clientele that have some sort of DEI committee or senior leadership team that is committed to DEI work. That usually signals to me that they're taking time and they're paying their employees to talk about this kind of work, hold themselves accountable, and figure out how to shift the or the corporate culture, whether in the nonprofit or for-profit spaces. Um, it says a lot about how people prioritize their time. That's one of the first signals that I have when people approach me, and usually, if someone approaches me from a higher seniority level, for example, like VP of Learning and Development, Chief Operating Officer, or um, the president of one of their major ERGs, that usually signals to me how serious they are. Otherwise, I'm not going to discount being approached by someone on and the individual contributor level, but they're more likely to um, hire you or have a serious conversation with you if they're in the more decision level status. So those are the two things that I primarily look for um, when I'm looking at companies.
Yeah. And even if you are maybe getting someone coming in at the individual contributor level, I think a lot about ERGs who are looking for speakers and things like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Due diligence of saying yes, and you're like using that as a starting point to see what else is going on in that organization. So
Mm-hmm.
welcoming the folks that are coming in and asking, and checking, following up is like, is this going to be a one-off, or is this a
Mm-hmm.
or opportunity to get connected into, say, their HR, learning development, people development um, team, so you can have the bigger conversations. And is there even any infrastructure around that already existing? So,
Mm-hmm.
oh, thanks, Carmella.
Thank you.
You really want to call? You like my name today, huh, Chris?
Yeah,
What a great name. I love your name, man.
Carmela, if it's any consolation, it happened. I have been called other folks' names many a time.
it's like I'm looking at your screen and I'm talking.
No, I get it. I get it. I grew up in a big
I
family. I
apologize
totally get
for
it.
that, Carmella. I don't mean that. I don't mean it. Yeah, my brain is like looking at one thing and I'm
Oh, it's
right,
all
like
good.
can you read the color green if it's printed in red?
yes,
So
that
Oh, yes.
I cannot.
No, same.
so one of my first sort of litmus test for whether an org is a good fit and I'm a good fit for them, just equally important, is similar to what you said, to the first thing you said, Carmela. So I am from the outset interested in who is going to hold the work when I leave. Not just who can I be connected to while I'm here, not just how long are you willing to commit to my presence or Langap's presence in support of this initiative, but who's holding this um, after my departure. And if the answer is we don't know, but we're willing, we are willing to commit. We will not just pile this on top of the work of someone who already has a more than full portfolio, but we're in it. We're really in it, and we're willing to put some money into institutionalizing support and not just thinking that even your absolutely amazing consulting support will be sufficient. That's an indicator that we are green light. We can keep moving there. Um, and if they're not, it's really just not the right time. And there were times in my life, so I want to talk about just note my own evolution as a practitioner. There many moons ago, there have been times in my life when I was willing to do one-offs because I didn't know any better, and I thought I was doing a service, and to some extent I was. And again, just as a part of my own evolution, there are just far better ways. So that is not no longer how I engage, and I don't lean into engagements where they expect a thing to be fixed that involves equity and inclusion after I leave. So that's huge. That's huge. That cuts, unfortunately, a lot of people out, at least in their first interaction with me. but my hope is that the clarity coming from me makes it possible for them to get their ducks in a row, to be prepared to really work with someone else and to really do the DIBJ work in a real way when they are ready, because we can do real harm here if we do things poorly. So another thing, so that's the first thing. Who's holding this work after I leave? What does leadership look like is critical. So do you really have, and I use this term very deliberately, skin in the game, and are you willing to put it in the game? What does leadership, not just what are leadership's intentions, but what do they look like? If leadership doesn't change, it is unlikely that this will stick. And that's a hard thing for people to hear. It used to be hard for me to say, and now I just know it to be true. Does that make sense to you? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I think we want to believe that it can come from a groundswell and bottoms up. And my experience has been if leadership is not on board, it's not gonna change. It's where the power dynamics are, the decision making is. So that has been my experience as well.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about you, Carmella.
Oh yeah. I thoroughly believe in the skin in the game concept. It holds that level of accountability, and they have more power to change corporate culture, policies, and systems. I think it's really important to acknowledge that without that person of leadership, it's going to be very challenging to make a long-term impact, because at the individual contributor level, there's only so much you can do.
So this is interesting to me, this dynamic, because yes, change feels, in our experiences, top down, and it's often the groundswell. It's often the individual contributors that are making like screaming about it, right? Saying we need this, we want this, this needs to happen. What's the bridge? What's like, how do you bridge that for folks? Fill that gap, or even make that a priority. Help leadership understand that as a priority. Like, how have you supported organizations in yeah, both from the bottoms up and the top down, even though like top down needs to get on board.
They need to get on board, and that is incredibly difficult to do. So we're talking about culture shift, y'all. We're talking about culture shift, which is why you can't do just a training or even a training series and expect to shift centuries, depending on when you start the clock, of fuckery. and what that means is that not when you're doing real culture shift work, not everyone will arrive at the destination with you. Not everyone is willing. And that's so at the individual contributor level, whether we're talking about executive leadership or we're talking about other folks with different positions in the organization, it's critical to recognize that in most cases, people don't pledge to do DEI work when they sign up. It's generally not in the job description, or at least not yet.
Mm-hmm.
And it's deeply personal work. It's deeply personal work, and not everyone is positioned or to be able to or willing to be able to do it. And that's a hard reality that organizations who do this well and come out stronger on the other side of it just have to be ready to face.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's hard to bridge that gap between individual contributors and team leaders. One thing that I've done with my team here at REI is I look at the successes of those specific marginalized community members. So there's one employee in particular. He is English and Spanish speaking, and I found out, and I worked with him at the registers for a little bit over the summer, and I found out at one point, about, at least that I have observed, 15 of the memberships that he sells in REI. So it's a key performance indicator that we have at REI, is that employees have to sell memberships. And I found in 1 week, he sold at least 15 memberships in Spanish. And these are community members. Most of them are local. They're more likely to spend money at our business compared to most of the memberships that we close are going to be coming from out of state, live in a very touristy area. Presented this to the team and I said, this is something important here. We have an untapped market that we could really lean into and build that relationship. And just little, what I've been doing them is kind of peppering them with the reasons why we should take this seriously. 3 of our 5 managers are women. Six out of 11 sales leads are women. A quarter of our team is LGBTQ plus. Well, the community or the county is counted at, I think, like 14, 15%. When we're looking at representation there, I share numbers. I think it's important when you're communicating that way, it's easier for them to communicate that with other managers and share that information with the rest of the team, because when you're sharing feelings, it's very subjective and hard to communicate. So that's how I advise team members that approach me at the individual contributor level, is to find out where those key areas of interest are. Are there specific people that are from historically underrepresented communities that are that have a lot of potential but don't have that mentorship? Are there community members that have been giving a lot of referrals from underutilized communities that have been high performers in the past couple of years? So these are things that I usually advise people on when they're looking to approach management.
Yeah. And another, Carmella, you're reminding me, one of the supports I very often offer is to create space that is management or leadership specific, because this is such deeply personal work, because the stakes are high, both personally and professionally, for people, not even just to get it right, but just to engage. This is difficult. This can be very difficult. And so creating the right containers for vulnerability, in the same way that I am very careful about how positions and how lines of authority show up in these spaces. So for instance, it's important that staff are able to be vulnerable, which is very difficult to do when you're in space with someone who's directly supervising you and isn't on board yet. I do the same thing with leadership. So creating spaces for leadership to have courageous conversations about equity and inclusion, so that they can really go there and do their own work, rather than not having done that work and then staff bearing the brunt of that disconnect, of the gap, as you described it, Krista.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think it's so important to both, Carmella, your hey, you have to arm yourself with data sometimes when you're on the individual contributor level, and then Marquita helping people at the leadership level do that work themselves. Like a lot of times when I ask folks, when I was doing executive coaching, for example, particularly for white allies, is like, why does this matter to you? Like, what is the cause? What is the thing that, like, why do you care? Why do you want to be the executive sponsor? What is the, because I think if you can't attach that, because earlier you said, Marquita, it's personal work, right? We have to, I think the groundswell, the folks, the individual contributors feel that personally and are looking for leadership to make decisions, right? To support the organization, to support them. So I think we feel it on the bottom, and leadership. Maybe I'm curious if they feel it as much or at all, and to understand their attachment. So some of that has been my curiosities and questioning when I was doing some coaching as well.
Yeah. And sometimes, speaking of coaching, it can be a longer journey for some than others, or just a different journey, which is when it can be incredibly helpful to for leadership to have coaching support around equity and inclusion in particular, so that they have a space to be supported in doing their work, and they're not requiring other folks to do their emotional labor. People who are not or do not feel like they have the authority to say no.
Yeah. Well, thank you both for joining me in this conversation today. We are about to wrap up, and I want to two things I want to leave folks with. The first one is, you know, there has been this sentiment, this heavier sentiment, particularly this year, of um, people aren't interested in this work as much anymore. That energy, that commitment, we're seeing slow down as a general statement, right? And which leads to frustration, leads to hopelessness, leads to, should I leave this industry? Can I continue? This work is hard enough to begin with, right? And it feels potentially even harder. So whether that's now or other times in your journey of doing this work, what keeps you still in it? What keeps you hopeful? What are you hope? What, or if not, what keeps you? What are you looking towards? Like, what do you see on the horizon?
One thing that keeps me in the game is living in a very white dude bro community, is finding those few people in the outdoor communities that have identities that mimic mine, and seeing their resilience as we're shifting to a more equitable community, seeing their passion for the outdoors and how they recreate differently compared to the historic traditional like bro ski culture, and seeing that and feeling that I'm able to be myself in these communities help remind me of why I do this work. Um, and that's what I want to see more of. That's what I want to see in the horizon. There are bigger things happening down in Denver and Colorado Springs and Fort Collins, in the state of Colorado where I live, and um, I just want to be a part of that. And it's very heartwarming to be seen as a leader for those communities.
Thanks, Carmella.
Thank you.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to hear, Carmella. What keeps me going, both now and keeps me excited about what is to come, is purpose. I can't overstate that enough. So, to the extent that I'm moving in alignment with my own purpose, the rest falls in line, and there are enough resources. Carissa, some of the channels that you're building for entrepreneurs and consultants and coaches being one of them. And there are lots of other resources, as long as you are clear about purpose. And so some of the folks who are feeling, like you are bumping your head against the wall in response to this conception that DEI is not dead, or in response to conceptions about other people's versions of reality that don't need to be yours. Again, issuing an invitation to do, as I often do, a gut check. And I use that term very deliberately too, around alignment with purpose. Am I aligned with my purpose? If yes, all will go. And if not, that's the real cause for concern, not folks who are, not these clients who are thankfully saying, no, this isn't for us.
Yeah. I appreciate both of you. Those are the two kind of maybe core things also that I'll share that keeps me committed to the work. And I think first the evolution of it, right? I was doing DEI consulting, doing DEI or executive coaching, and have moved into more of a capacity of supporting others who, other consultants, other practitioners to do that work. Because I think y'all are actually better at that work than I am. But and seeing my role in the ecosystem as supporting you as a business owner, right? So I think that's one thing, is maybe aligned with purpose, but also aligned with skill, right? Like understanding. And I think by trying all these different things, different industries, niching down, etc., you start to find like what is actually your zone of genius, like what is your purpose or your role in the ecosystem. I think that can help move things forward, and understand that, Carmella, you were talking about community, right? I can't do this by myself, and it's nice to at times commiserate, but also find hope together with other folks, to move who get me, who move it forward. What I love about talking with you, Carmella, about the outdoor industry, I am seeing the emergence of things like, Brown Girls Climb, for example, right?
Ah,
Like,
they're amazing.
yeah, and I think we have to have these organizations start, and we're there to support, right? So I love that. And then on the individual side, Marquita, the EQ is all about purpose, understanding what's going on, awareness, right? And I think we all have to be anchored in that for us to move anything difficult forward. Anything that is not even difficult, just complex, just move forward, right? So as we wrap up, would just love for you to share, both of you to share with the audience, how can people work with you? What are you working on that's exciting now that maybe you want to invite folks into?
Yeah. So what I do mostly, I do DEI consulting, but on the personal side, I have an email list. I am going to be rebooting my podcast. And if you are interested in potentially participating in my DEI research that I'm doing as a graduate student, feel free to reach out to me. We're going to be looking at impactful work and longevity work for companies. We're still in the process of finalizing that research. But if you're interested in being part of that, please reach out because I am looking for participants.
Awesome. Thanks, Camilla.
Thank you.
And one of the ways folks can be in touch with me is reaching out to me on my website, marquitajames.com or langyapconsulting.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. Some of what I am working on and excited about calling in and connecting with people about first would be the Courageous Conversations work that I'm doing and supporting organizations who say, actually, no, we are in it. This is not performative. We're willing to do the hard work because we understand that it's worth it. It's really, really worth it. And so we can either get with it or get rolled over by it. So really working with those organizations to shift the culture of their organization so that they're having courageous conversations about everything, including equity and inclusion. So that's one thing I'm really excited about. Would love to hear from people about if you or your organization are curious and tapping into that. And the second thing is coaching executive leadership around how to move more courageously. So a lot of courageous leadership coaching, which involves the whole swirl of issues that we've been talking about today. So please be in touch. I'd love to hear from you. Love to hear what you're working on.
Yes, thank you so much. Information we can drop in the chat or in the comments if you want to connect. I highly encourage you all to connect with both Carmella and Marquita on LinkedIn and their other channels. For myself, I just appreciate both of you for joining on this Wisdom and Wellness Day, this conversation. I'm always about deeper conversations for the deeper connection, and that's who we want to work with. That's how we're able to discern who we want to work with, who's on the same page, who we want to spend time with. So very much appreciate you for doing this and addressing a topic that I've just been hearing a lot about in the equity space. And for those of you, hopefully y'all have enjoyed this, have found some inspiration, some tidbits, some Carmella's, branding notes, some business tips, especially as practitioners, of how you can also just really start to develop yours and find your niche, find your pocket, find your purpose, according to Marquita. Find where you fit, right? And find the right clients that align with you and your values and what you're doing. So I know that can be challenging sometimes and we need some direction. And so my role, like I said, in the ecosystem is to be able to support folks, support consultants, independent consultants, practitioners, et cetera, in doing all that work, in finding the right aligned clients, right? And finding the potential collaborators and such to work with, and also the team members, say. Also building community of folks to be able to have some of that support when sometimes you charging along can feel challenging. right? So if you're interested in any of that, I have some things brewing in the next couple of months where you can get more involved. And so just follow along with me on LinkedIn would be the best right now. ConsciousExchange.com. A community thing is coming. Wink, wink. And more immediately, I do have a workshop for folks who are looking how do you find clients, right? How do you start to maybe take again some of the tips that Carmella and Marquita here shared today, and operationalize that. Maybe you need a little bit more step-by-step support. And so I'm going to be hosting tomorrow a workshop on sales. Sales can be one of the scarier things, especially outbound sales. To do for as independent consultants. So I'm going to break that down with my friend David Ho. We're going to give you some like practical steps on how you can not do this broy marketing, broy sales kind of style. Really do that from an authentic place. For I will say, smiling and laughing on sales calls. So how do you shift your mindset on that? And what are some of the very practical tips on how you start to go find those values aligned, purpose aligned clients. So if you're interested in joining that, that's tomorrow at 5 p.m. PST, 8 p.m. Eastern. You can register in my my bio or on my profile, my LinkedIn profile, or in the comments below. So thank you again so much for everyone for joining us, Carmella, Marquita for joining the conversation. And best of luck to all of you in your journeys of doing this work. It is crucial. It is needed. I think we're feeling that again in the last 2 weeks. So don't get discouraged. Find your people, find your clients, those values aligned clients. And let's really start to move our liberatory futures together. Bye.